Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. It's chus of our learning. We have the base of Migdash immediately. Here, for all those that need. Yechiel Nassim ben Sarah, Aaron David Alevi ben Menachem Lester, Avram Efel ben Sarah, Asher Anshel Halevi ben Miriam Edel, and Sarah Bastuni. We're going to start on Vav Amid Beis, the bottom line. See that? The bottom line says Tanan Hassam. Tanan Hassam was taught there. It's a Mishnah in Peah. Elu Dvarim Shein Lahem Shir. Should sound familiar. The following things do not have any measurement. That means whatever you do is good, there's no limit. What are these things? So it's really referring to there's no limit min Torah. Some of them have limits rabbinically. They have. The first one is Peah. Peah is when you leave the corner of your field for the poor. So how big is the corner? So there's no limit to that. So Elu Dvarim Shein Lahem Shir. But the sages say that it should be 1/60th of the field. Rabbi Kurim, the first fruits. How many fruits are the first fruits? So there's no limit.
How big is the first fruit?
Yeah. How big is it? I guess when it ripens, whatever it is. Yeah. V'harayan. Rayan is the reason why we're quoting this, is because it's Rayan is Re'iyah, which we're talking about. Hakol chayavim b'Re'iyah. Everyone's obligated to come to the Beis Hamikdash and bring the carbon Re'iyah. So apparently that has no limit either. U'gumilas chasadim, and acts of kindness. Now, obviously, that's not referring to monetary, Taisus points out, because monetary acts of kindness do have a limit. It's referring to how many times you go to visit the sick person, or how long you dance around with the chassan and, visiting the, what's it called? Nicham Avelim, how long you stay and all of that. Or how many times you go. Talmud Torah, and also Torah study has no limit. Amar Rabbi Yechanan says regarding this Mishnah that we quoted, we understood that when we said Harayan Ein Leishir, that's referring to how big the sacrifice is going to be. When you bring a carbon riyah, it could be very, very expensive. But the minimal price, that has to be a ma kesef, according to Beis Hillel, 2 ma, according to Beis Shammai. So even though the Mishnah says there's no limit, that's no limit how much, but what's the minimal price, that we understood has a limit. And that limit, according to Rabbi Yechanan, is halachah l'meish misinai, and it would be considered a deraisa. Halachah l'meish misinai is considered deraisa. Not that it's written in the Torah, it has the severity of a deraisa. Ad sheba Rabbi Shia, until Rabbi Shia came, Rabbi Shia Berebi, Rabbi Shia the Great. V'li made, and he taught us, there is no shear, not maximum shear and not minimal shear. We have a machlekes Beis Beis Shammai, if it's 1 ma or 2 ma, that's all rabbinic law. Aval, now you have to accept the Bach's gear, so Rashi has it also. It says, Aval Amru Chachamim, you switch those words around. Chachamim makes it sound like there's a machlekes. That's not what he's saying, that there's a machlekes. What he's saying is that that rabbinically, there is a shear. Aval Amru Chachamim, but the sages have told us a shear. Biblically, there's no shear. The sages said, Haraya ma kasef, Haraya ma kasef, Chagigah shtei kasef. That's the opinion of Beis Hillel, that the Chagigah is more expensive than the Re'iyah. The part that we eat is more expensive than the part that just goes straight to Hashem Na'ila. My hara'ayin. What is the meaning of the word ra'ayin? In other words, when we said over here, Elu Dvarim Shein Lahem Shir, we didn't say hara'iyah, which would be the sacrifice. We said hara'ayin. What is it coming to tell me? So Rabbi Yechanan Marias Panim Bazara. Turns out that hara'ayin Ein Lahem Shir, according to Rabbi Yechanan, means how many times do you have to go inside the Azara when you go up to the base of Mikdash? You have to go in every day. You have to go in at least once. There's no limit. Rish Lakish Amariyas Panim Bekarban. Rish Lakish says that it means that every time you come, you have to bring a sacrifice. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Riyas Panim Bazara means that it's only visiting. It's just a visit. According to Rish Lakish, every time you come, you have to bring a sacrifice. Yeah, according to Rabbi Yochanan, once you brought, you also have to bring a sacrifice, but you're allowed to go visit without a sacrifice. So you only have to bring a sacrifice once. According to Rish Lakish, if you're coming, you have to bring a present. Sort of like the grandparents visiting. So, yeah, that's every time. Okay. It's Rish Lakish's view. The Ikara Regel Kulyamali Pligi, the Riyas Panim Bekarban, everyone holds on the first day of the holiday, when you show up, you have to bring the sacrifice. Ki Pligi B'Shaya Meiser Regel. The question is, where's the machlaikas on the other days of the holiday? Kol Hechada Savaisi. Everyone agrees that if you bring a sacrifice, and you come and you bring, say, okay, you could bring another sacrifice. That's not a problem. The machlekes is if you come, but you don't have the sacrifice. So Rabbi Yochanan Savariyas Panim Bazara. Rabbi Yochanan says that's fine. You made it to the Azara, that's good. You don't need to bring another sacrifice. You don't have to bring a sacrifice every time. You just come in and you bow down. Rish Lakish Amariyas Panim Bekarban. Rish Lakish says no. Every time you need to bring a sacrifice. Every time you come, you have to bring a sacrifice.
I feel like today when you go to the shrines, there was a debate whether or not you're allowed to go to Kriya, whatever. So some people only go after Friday afternoon, right? I wonder if there was a way to come only
to avoid.
Yeah, because it doesn't sound. It sounds pretty challenging that every time a person came to the base of Mikdash, I assume the first time in 30 days, he had to bring a carbon.
Yeah. It's only if he enters into the Azara. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sure they all showed up and took their pictures.
Right.
So just a huge amount of animals.
Look, every time someone gets an aliyah, they make another pledge. No? Some people.
Right, exactly. Some people. Right, exactly. After a while, people figure out, okay, I did it 3 times the last week. I'm just gonna,
Right.
It's very challenging circumstance.
Also, the pledge over here is not really Amma. Amma is not the biggest amount of money. It's Amma, 32 prutas. It's 32 pennies. What would it be? Let's say that's 10 cents each or something. What is it? $3? Not a big deal.
They weren't bringing an animal each time.
No.
I'm saying, were they buying an animal for $3?
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, how many animals were there? They must have some huge farms to raise all these animals. Where was this all coming from?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I find Korban Pesach to be challenging enough. Where they get all these lands from?
Yeah, I got an aliyah once in the show, and the guy before me had pledged the Sefer Torah to the show. I felt very uncomfortable saying Chai, but all right, I guess they get those also. Okay, Eisvei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish asked the question to Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so but basically, a machlekes over here is if you have to bring a sacrifice every time you visit the temple, the Azara, if you have to come with the sacrifice. So Rish Lakish holds that yes. So his question to Rabbi Yochanan is actually from a pasuk. It says, "V'la yeru panai rekam." You shall not see my face empty-handed. Mamish a pasuk. How's he going to answer that? Amalei b'ikar regel. He says, yeah, that's talking about the first day of Yom Tov. The other days, it's no problem. Okay. Eisvei. Now he's going to quote the pasuk with the brisa, and we're going to get the same answer. It says, you shouldn't see my face empty-handed. What is that talking about? Bizvachim. You have to bring a sacrifice. Bizvachim means an animal sacrifice. How do you know you have to bring an animal sacrifice? Maybe you can bring a bird or a meal offering. Vidinu. He says the reason that we know this is because it's logical. The people bring a carbon chagigah. That's a gift for themselves. That's like the way they celebrate. The way they celebrate is with the meat of the chagigah. And you also have to give a gift to Hashem. When it came to your own food, it was an animal sacrifice. Also, what you give to Hashem is an animal food. Yeah. An animal that's slaughtered. What is considered the animal? Oilas. It's a burnt offering. How do you know that when Layero Panay Rekam means that you bring an animal offering that's an oila? Oila means entirely burnt. Maybe bring an animal offering that's a shlamim, that means that you eat and the kayan eats. And this says, no, it's logical. Vidinhu. It says that the people get the chagigah. Hashem gets the re'iyah. Just like the chagigah is something that's fit for the people, that means it's something that they actually eat. So too, the re'iyah is something that goes directly to Hashem, which is a burnt offering. Okay. It's also logical. What would happen if you would say that you bring a shlamim as a riyah? What would happen? Your table would be full of meat, and Hashem's table, the mizbeach, would have very little meat on it. Says that's not appropriate. That means that the mizbeach gets an oila and the people get a shlamim. Okay, so what are we quoting over here? We're saying that you have to bring a sacrifice when you come to visit. Shamarlei, Rabbi Yochanan says, Bikar Regel, it's only talking about the first day of the holiday, not every day of the holiday. Eisvei. Now we have another question from Rish Lakish. It says, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yudaimer. Rabbi Yosef. Yeah. Yeah. Rabbah. Yeah, your master. Hashem. You want it to mean something else?
That was like the first thought when I read it.
Okay. Yeah, the master. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says, Shalosh regalim b'shana nitzdav Yisrael alis beregel. The Jewish people were commanded 3 times a year to go up to the temple. B'chag ha'matzos, that's Pesach, b'chag ha'shvuos, b'chag ha'sukkos. Ve'ein nirech hatzayin. This is a little bit of a difficult phrase. The Gemara is going to ask what it means. But it says, just simply, the phrase is, you can't be seen in half. Okay, what does that mean? We'll see. Because it says all the males have to go, not half. We'll see in the Gemara. You shouldn't appear, you shouldn't be seen empty-handed. You shouldn't see my face empty-handed. Okay, so there's another question. It says that you have to bring a sacrifice when you come. That's Rish Lakish's opinion. What does Rabbi Yochanan do? He answers the same answer, that it's talking about the first day of the holiday. The other days of the holiday, there's no problem. Now, yeah, that's Rabbi Yochanan's view.
That makes sense.
Yeah, only the first time you come. Yeah.
So only if the first time you come is on the first day of Yom Tov.
Well, no. When you come, you bring a sacrifice on the first day of Yom Tov. That's the ikar. You stay the whole Yom Tov. You don't have to bring any more sacrifices.
It's still a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, the grandparents come to stay. They come for a week. They bring presents the first day. They don't bring another every morning, another present. Okay. Esrei Rabbi Yochanan l'Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan now asks in return to Reish Lakish. It says, Yera Yira. You're seen and you also see. Mani bechinam, afatim bechinam. Just like by me, Hashem is saying, it's for free. You don't have to bring anything. Also, I don't have to give you anything when you come. Afatim bechinam. You also, it's for free. You don't have to give anything. Wow. How did this contradicts the whole thing? That you have to bring a sacrifice. The Gemara now switches the whole premise, the whole assumption here. Our assumption was originally that if you come and bring a sacrifice, that's perfectly fine. Like this was if you come without a sacrifice. Now we're saying if you come and you don't bring a sacrifice, everyone agrees that that's perfectly fine. The machlekes is if you do bring a sacrifice. Rabbi Yochanan says there's a limit. You're allowed to come in as many times as you want, but the sacrifice you only bring once. That's limited. It means bringing sacrifices. You can bring a carbon however often you want, even though you don't have to. You follow? Mm-hmm. Now this is a totally different shot. What's happening?
I lost the spot.
On the bottom of Zion 7a, probably about 8, 9 lines from the bottom. Yeah, so we switched everything around over here. Okay, Esrei. Now we have another question. Haiker means to make precious. Yakar is precious. It says in Mishlei that you should make your feet precious from your friend's house. That means don't visit too often. Pasuk concludes, so they shouldn't have to be. They shouldn't be disgusted with you. Don't overstay. Yeah, don't overstay. So what that means is that you shouldn't bring too many karbanos. That's the way the Gemara understands it. The Gemara says Hasan b'chatayis v'ashamis. That's talking about sin offerings. Don't bring too many sin offerings. Well, why not? It says, well, Kid Rab Levi, the Rab Levi Rami. Rab Levi posed the contradiction. That you should make your feet precious from your friend's house. Yeah. I come to your house with burnt offerings. That means that you do bring sacrifices. It says, well, sin offerings versus peace offerings. Peace offerings you could bring, sin offerings you shouldn't bring too often. But that means don't sin. That means don't sin. It doesn't mean sin and not, apologize, not bring the sacrifice. It means don't do it. Don't do the sin. Tanya Namihachi was also taught in a brisa. Make your feet precious from your friend's house. It means avoid having to go often with sacrifices. It's talking about the sin offerings, sin and guilt offerings. Maybe it's talking about burnt offerings and peace offerings. Come to your house with burnt offerings. I pay my pledge. That means he's going to go and give those gifts, the burnt and peace offerings. So how do I fulfill the verse that you should make your feet precious from the friend's house? That's but that's talking about sin offerings. Don't sin. Okay. Beis Reyacha, your friend's house, is referring to Hashem. It's called the friend. It says until him l'manachai v'reyai. Hashem calls us his friend. Okay, we have to go back to explain what we meant, that because it says kol zechorcha, all the males, that means he can't come half. What does that mean, half? Can't come in half. Chulu. Sav Rabbi Yosef Lemeimar, Rabbi Yosef understood this to mean, you see, I could have thought that maybe, what does it mean? You shouldn't come half. That means you shouldn't just bring half the family. You should bring the whole family. All the males need to come. So don't just bring half. The problem is that when the pasuk says males, it's referring to all the males. It doesn't have to say all the males. Once it says males, it means all the males. So what would it mean, all the males? That means that I shouldn't bring half today and half tomorrow. They should all come together. That's the extra word, all. So Rabbi Yosef thought that maybe what it means is someone that has 10 sons, he shouldn't bring 5 today and 5 tomorrow. Amalei Abaya. Abaya says to Rabbi Yosef, Abaya is this famous student of Rabbi Yosef. He says, Pshita, I would understand that on my own. Which ones do you want to consider sinners, and which ones do you want to consider those that are how do you translate Zerizim?
Diligent.
Diligent. Which one would be the lazy? Which one would be the diligent? Like how are you going to choose that? Just take any 5. Elakrala Mayasa. So Yosef says back, so what do you want to do with the pasuk? Pasuk says, Kol zechorcha, all the males. That was coming to tell me, according to him, that you don't do 5 today and 5 tomorrow. So he says, look at the achirim. We're going to use it for what achirim says. Achirim is usually Reb Meir. The Tanya was taught in a brayso achirim maimrim. Others say, we had this before, that hamakamitz, someone that collects manure, or mitzaref necheshes, and someone that refines copper, bursi, and a tanner, p'turim min ariyah, they don't have to go up to the temple. Why? Because it says, kol zechorcha, shenemar kol zechorcha, all the males, mishiach kol zechorcha, only someone that would be able to walk together with the group. Yatsu elo, sheinichem lalasim kol zechorcha, but these people, they wouldn't be walking with everyone else. Why not? Because of the smell. Yeah.
So they become separate.
So they don't have to go. Yeah. So what's the
Does
pshat? We had this.
Does this kol zechorcha have anything to do with ages of the Zecharim? Like the Taf and the and Zikanim or anything of that sort that cannot make,
No,
because it's all associated with the walk, but it says all zechorcha, which means that it seems so accentuated, but it doesn't make any reference to what we've been talking about. Who are those that can make the walk and not want to make the walk?
Right. We learned from Regel that it needs to be people that can make the walk. Shalish regalim bashan tachagli shalish regalim tachagli. That we learned that it needs to be people that make the walk. Now what we're doing is, at least the way the Rashi wants to learn, Rashi rejects the pshat that people wanted to tell him. He says Chaveirai mefarshim. He rejects it. Rashi's pshat, what he wants to learn over here is that when it says kol zechorcha, it means they all have to be able to walk together. And if they won't be able to go together with these people, then these people are exempt. A new pshat. Rabbi Yosef was learning that you don't bring 5 today and 5 tomorrow, you need that all together. Abaya's pshat is that they all have to come together. Anyone that wouldn't be coming together doesn't have to come at all.
I think is the concept of the growth on
Right.
that when you have no one convenient minyan in a place where people can come together, that it's not really as happy as if
They're all together.
these little groups, then you should all come together. I don't know.
Interesting. Clicks. Hashem doesn't like clicks. Okay. Ready? We have a new Mishnah. The words of the Mishnah are easy. The concepts are, the diyukim over here are very difficult. It starts off with oilais, the burnt offerings, b'mayid. Right away, it makes it complicated for us. An chol hamayid, bayis min hachulin. That comes from money that's not meiser. You see, what would happen is like this. Every person that had a field would be able to take his meiser to Yerushalayim, and in Yerushalayim he would eat it. It was too heavy, there was too much stuff, so he would exchange it for money. They would bring the money to Yerushalayim, and in Yerushalayim he would buy food. What types of food? Anything that's edible. So one of the things that he could buy is animals, and he could eat the animals. He'd bring it as a peace offering, and he could eat it. What about if it was an oila?
But isn't the moed referring to the Yom Tov, not to the Chol Hamoed?
It's actually, we'll see a contrast in a moment that it's going to be Chol Hamoed. Yeah. Mayed means Yom Tov, you're right, but it's here it would be referring to Chol Hamoed. That's what it sounds like. The oilas that come on Chol Hamoed have to come from not meiser money, but all your other money, all your regular mundane money. You can't use meiser for the oilas. Yeah, the Gemara is going to discuss, it's only on Chol Hamoed, but okay, let's see. Bashlamim, but if it's a peace offering, this is referring to the animals that are brought because of simcha. You want to have extra meat. Why do you need the meat? Because you want to eat the meat, because that's the way of fulfilling the mitzvah of simcha and Yom Tov. That is mina meiser. That could be from the money that was from the tithe that you bring to Yerushalayim, because that's something that you eat. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. If it's the first day of Yom Tov, of Pesach, Beishamai Yamrim Min HaChulin, Beishamai says that is brought only from Chulin, and Beisil Min HaMeiser Beisil says even then you can bring it from Meiser. Talking about the Chagigah that's brought on Pesach. Yeah. Now, Yisrael Yotzin Yedei Chevasim Ben Adarim Unadavais B'Meiser Behema. You don't have to bring a special animal just to have simcha. Let's say you had other animals, sacrifices that you brought, because you made a pledge. Sometime during the year, you made a pledge. You bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, and you eat it on Yom Tov or on Chol Hamoed. You're Yaitza Simcha with those animals as well. It doesn't need to be a specially designated animal for Simcha. Any meat is good. This verbringen, that verbringen. You're Yaitza. And the Kayanim have even more options of eating, because they bring sacrifices that other people are donating, and they eat from those sacrifices as well. For example, a sin offering or a guilt offering. They take pieces of that animal, or a bechar is a firstborn offering that the Yisrael would give. The Kayan can eat from it. B'chazav b'shaik. They bring a shlamim, then the Kayan gets the chazav b'shaik. They get a part of that animal as well, even though the owner gets a part, but the Kayanim also get a part. You can't fulfill the obligation of simcha with eating chicken. There's no chicken in the Beis Hamikdash. With eating dove and turtle dove, or the flour and oil crackers. That's not simcha. That's simcha. Yeah.
What you mean for this specific?
You're trying to fulfill the mitzvah of simcha and Yom Tov. It has to be actually meat. Yeah, we don't have
not considered meat.
We don't have actually the mitzvah of simcha today that we should say, on Shabbos I need to have actual meat. On Yom Tov, Shabbos doesn't really have simcha. On Yom Tov I need actual meat. We don't have that because we don't have simcha from the meat, because it's not a shlamim, it's not a sacrificial meat. For us today, our simcha is only from wine. Yeah.
Doesn't it say in simcha b'basar v'yayin?
Yeah. But that's the basar over there is referring to the shlamim. Yeah. So we're left with just the yayin.
Rabbi, have you been to Izzy's?
There's an ad in the Frum papers on like the Hamadiyah, whatever. There's this ad quoting the Alter Rebbe that says that not only on Yom Tov do you have to drink a revius of wine, but you even have to drink a revius of wine on Chol Hamoed. Every day of Chol Hamoed, you have to have a revius of wine to be Eitz Simcha. Yeah. Kedem put the ad in. Okay. Okay, now we are up to the Gemara. It says, there was a strange word in there. I mean, look, there's a contrast between an oila and a shlamim. That's an easy contrast. Shlamim is eaten and oila is not. When it comes to meiser money, it has to be something that you're going to eat. So a shlamim, yes, and an oila, no. But why do you have to tell me that it's only on Chol Hamoed? Do you mean to say that on Chol Hamoed, it has to come from Chulin? But on Yom Tov, if I'm bringing an oila on Yom Tov, the oila sriya, which is brought on Yom Tov, that could come from meiser? Is that what you're trying to tell me? You see, Yosef, that there's a contrast here. Mayed versus Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, it could come from meiser. Amai. How could it come from meiser if it's on Yom Tov? Davar shebachayvahi. It's an obligation. B'chol davar shebachayvahi ein haba men achulin. Anything that's an obligation has to come from mundane money. You're never allowed to pay up your debts with meiser. If you go to Yerushalayim, you owed someone money, you can't say, oh, I have meiser sheni money. Here, take it. You can't do that. But we apply this today with meiser ksafim, meiser money. You separate it at the 10th. So if you owe money to the shul, you can't say, oh, I have meiser money, I'll give it to the shul to pay up that membership fee or whatever. If you owe the money before, you can't pay it up. But if you pledge your meiser money to the shul, l'chatchila, then that's a different story. But you can never pay a debt. You can never pay a debt with meiser. So here, if it's an obligation, for example, matanis leviyanim, it's coming up. You have to give gifts to the poor on Purim. So you can't use meiser money for that. It's an obligation. But it's tzedakah. That's exactly what I did. No, it's a chayva. Meiser is something else. This is from your own money you have to give. Okay, so how can you bring a oila, an obligation, a carbon ria, which is an obligation? How can you bring it on Yom Tov from meiser? It's an obligation. Obligations have to come from chulin. And if you'll say, Hakamashman is coming to teach us, the oilis b'mayed bayis b'yam tevena bayis. Maybe you're trying to tell me that you're not allowed to bring an oila on Yom Tov. See, communal sacrifices are brought on Yom Tov, but private sacrifices are not brought on Yom Tov. What type of private sacrifice would be brought on Yom Tov? When you're going to eat from it. A shlamim, if you're going to eat from it, you could bring it. Why? Because you're allowed to shech. It's food. You're allowed to shech on Yom Tov. But you're not allowed to bring an oila, maybe, because you're not even eating from it. It's not considered oichel nefesh. So come on, but who holds that? That's Beis Shammai. That would only be Beis Shammai's opinion. The Tanana was taught in the Mishnah. Beis Shammai Emrim maybe in shlamim vein seimchan aleim. When you bring a carbon shlamim, you can't lean on it. Just like on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to ride on an animal. You're also not allowed to lean on the animal. Every sacrifice, you're supposed to lean on it. So when you bring the peace offering on Yom Tov, which you're allowed to do, even according to Beis Shammai, but you're not allowed to lean on it because that's muktzah. And Beis Avaloy Oilas, but Beis Shammai holds you can't bring an oila because it's not echol nefesh. You're not eating from it. It goes straight to the fire, to the mizbeach. Bisalim maybe in shlam and vailas v'seim chanalim. Bisil says no, you're allowed to bring an oila as well, and you can lean on. So don't tell me that oilas b'mayid bayis min achulin, but not on Yom Tov, because Beis Hillel holds that it does come on Yom Tov. I'm allowed to bring the oilas riya on Yom Tov. It was a big discussion. You come to the temple for the holiday, so you bring sacrifices. So personal sacrifices really should come on Chol Hamoed, not on Yom Tov. But yeah, that's the personal sacrifice. But what about the holiday sacrifices? Holiday sacrifices, so if it's a shlamim, you can bring it on Yom Tov. If it's an oila, which is the oila sriya, it's a machlekes Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. where Beis Hillel says you can bring it on Yom Tov. So the Gemara answers, we have to adjust the Mishnah to make it work. We have to add in words. It goes like this. Pledges that you had from previous, you said, if this happens, I'm going to bring or for whatever reason, you made a pledge throughout the year. So those are Nedarim and Nedavis. One is he accepts on himself, one he designates the item. But Mayid Bayis, those only come on Chol Hamoed. But Yom Tov Ein Bayis, you can't bring that on Yom Tov. It's not, has no association with the holiday. V'Eilas Riyah ba'afila b'Yom Tov. The Eilas Riyah comes actually on Yom Tov because we're following Beis Hillel. It says the Eilas Riyah, when you come to the temple, you have to bring a sacrifice. When would you come? On Yom Tov, and you would bring the sacrifice. But when you bring it, it has to come from Chulin. Why? Because it's an obligation. Shalmei Simcha. What about the peace offerings of Simcha? But Af Min HaMaaseh, they can come from the tithe. Why? Because it's food. Food for you. You could eat it. The Chagigas Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. On the first day of Pesach, you had to bring a carbon Chagigah. So Beis Shammai Yamrim Min HaChulin. Beis Shammai says that's an obligation offering. It comes from Chulin. Beis Hillel Yamrim Min HaMaaseh. Beis Hillel says that can come from Meiser as well. Tanya Namihachi was also taught in a Brisa, very similar to the way we adjusted the Mishnah. It says Eiles Nedarim and Adavis Bayis B'Mayit. Those pledges, those donation offerings, they come on Chol Hamoed. The Yom Tov Ein Bayis, but you can't bring them on Yom Tov. And as what we're doing here is we're showing that the way we adjusted the Mishnah actually matches quite well with the way we have a Brisa. But the Eilas Riyah does come on Yom Tov. That's considered a holiday sacrifice. It's not just the community sacrifice that comes on Yom Tov, but an Eilah holiday sacrifice also comes on Yom Tov. But you have to bring it from Chulin money. That means regular money, not Meiser money, because it's an obligation. But the Simcha, that comes from Meiser. Why? Because it's not an obligation. Maybe you had other meat. You don't have to bring it. It's extra. You can avoid it. Yeah. They say, if you would want to give extra matanis levyanim, you can use Meiser. If you wanted to buy an esrog or something, or buy tefillin, you're allowed to use Meiser money. It's for a mitzvah. Officially Meiser is supposed to go to the poor. But let's say we hold that it goes to other things also, shuls and other things, not just the poor. So for sure, the initial price of the tefillin is not allowed to be Meiser. Let's say a pair of tefillin costs $300, $400. It's not allowed to be Meiser. Now you're also supposed to add to that Hider mitzvah. So you have to add another, that's a third. That would be another $100, let's say. Depends how you divide a third. You really divide it in half. So, and then you add, so it's $150. Okay, so that would also not be Meiser, but you want to spend $800. So the last, $250 that you can use Meiser for. That's not an obligation. That's your own, if that would be the case.
So, Rabbi,
yeah,
how is Orla Carbon Mutar on Yom Tov? Isn't it? Doesn't it have to be Ochel Nefesh? So
yeah,
they say if it's from a Chulin, then it makes it Mutar. Just going back,
right?
Yeah,
right.
Why?
Yeah.
Why is that exactly?
The Chulin isn't the factor here.
Oh,
it's considered something that's a Yom Tov need. So that's why it's allowed. It's based on the pasuk b'chagosim I say.
okay.
Yeah, it's based on the pasuk that you're supposed to bring the carbon, so that sort of like pushes off the obligation. It pushes off the violation of sacrificing on Yom Tov. Shalmi Simcha, Boinaf Min HaMaaseh. Chagigas Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, we have the same discussion. Beis Shammai Yomrim Min HaChulin, Beis Hillel Min HaMaaseh. The first day, is that considered, the first day of Pesach, is that considered a obligation offering, or is it considered something that you'd bring from Meiser? It's a machlekes Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Okay, now the Gemara asks, Ma'ishna Chagigas Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. You have a Chagigah every holiday. Why are you telling me about the Pesach? It says, oh, Amar Rav Ashi Kamash Malon. Rav Ashi says, no, it's coming to tell me something else. Chagigas Chamisha Asur in, Chagigas Arba Saloi. It's coming to tell me that Chagigah of the 14th, you see, on Pesach, if you had a large group that needed to eat the Korban Pesach, the Korban Pesach needed to be eaten after you were full already. Ala Seiva. Meat, according to the Gemara, is eaten for dessert. The Korban Pesach is eaten for dessert. If you wouldn't have enough to go around for everyone to get and to be full, so then you would bring another sacrifice because you had a large group. They would fill up on the other sacrifice, and then Afikaiman, the dessert, was the Korban Pesach, but they needed to be full beforehand, right? So the Shalmei Chagigah that was brought on the 14th for the Seder night was not necessary. Not every group had it. Depends on the size of the group. Some people just had the Korban Pesach. Some people had the Shalmei Chagigah as well. So because of that, the Shalmei Chagigah could be brought from Meiser because it wasn't an obligation. It's only if you needed it. But the Shalmei Chagigah of the 15th, that's already Yom Tov. The Shalmei Chagigah of the 14th, there's two holidays here. There's Chag Pesach, which is the 14th of Nisan. There's Chag Matzos, which is the 15th of Nisan, which lasts for 7 days. So the Shalmei Chagigah of the Korban Pesach, that there's no machlekes. Everyone holds it comes from Meiser. The Shalmei Chagigah of the 15th, that's a machlekes Beisil Beishamai. Alma Kasavar Chagigah Sarbasa Lav Deraisa. That means that the Chagigah of the 14th is not necessarily a biblical obligation to bring. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Pesach, Rabbi,
Yeah.
was supposed